is real. Listen. Hi, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is Curious Explorers. Hey, Kathy.
Hey, Trace.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. We have so much to catch up on, as always.
Yeah, it's already been an interesting week.
Oh, I'll say I like it. It's code for all kinds of stuff. So today I was thinking maybe we would start by kind of catching up. I have a little fan mail I'd like to share with
Ooh.
you. I love that somebody reached out and I want to kind of, share what they had to say. And then maybe we can catch up on Krampus,
Oh,
which
yeah, absolutely.
totally seasonally appropriate. And I know you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, definitely in a Krampus mood.
Absolutely. So here's just a kind of funny aside. It's not actually funny, but it'd be funny to people like us. It depends on how you think about it. Anyway, my mother, did I ever tell you this? I saw her a few days ago. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but we've talked about precognitive dreams on
Mm-hmm.
this podcast and all kinds
Right.
of psi phenomena. Now, my mother is not someone who has ever tried to develop her psychic ability. She probably doesn't spend an undue amount of time thinking about it, although she likes spooky movies, but that's still a little different. I don't think I ever told you that my mother has dreams, and in the dreams, she has her dead relatives there, and she sees them a lot in her dreams. And I think that they're probably visitations.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the somewhat creepy thing. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to
We're
start
getting
laughing.
to the creepy thing. We're getting to it. That's not creepy enough.
I know. I don't know why. Like Jay says, I laugh at weird stuff. I'm sure there's something completely wrong with me, but this is the creepy part. So, she will occasionally have a dream where she's with the dead people
Mm-hmm.
and she's always happy to see them. But then there will be someone who is a living person that she also knows who's with them as well. And
Mm-hmm.
then inevitably, within no more than 2 weeks, that person passes. So,
Yeah, that's creepy. Yes, indeed.
so no one, everybody's like, don't tell
dream
me if you
about me.
dream about me. And I said, I asked her, I was talking to her earlier today. I'm like, so do you ever have living people show up in these, dead caravan dreams? Because a lot
Yeah.
of them take place for some reason in a car. There's a whole bunch of them in the car with my mother, and they're going somewhere. And then
Well,
there's like,
I think we know where they're going, right?
I think we kind of do. And she'll turn around and she knows they're dead, but she's so happy to see them and they see him alive. And then she'll turn around and it'll be like, oh, hey, there's so-and-so. What's so-and-so doing in the car or whatever? And inevitably so-and-so's along for the ride for a good reason. And I realize I sound like I'm making light of this, but we all have a path. We all have that on our path. It's one of the few universal things, right? But so I said, like, has anyone ever been in the car or on these trips, or like it'll be sometimes in my grandparents' kitchen or something, and the living person actually doesn't die?
Mhm.
And my mother is very kind of simple and straightforward with things. She's like, no.
Stanford does. That's funny.
Yeah, like it's just a very
Does it
specific
does it bother her?
precognitive thing. I'm sorry?
Does it bother her
No. It bothers her after she finds out
that they've
that the
passed?
person has passed. And,
Right.
it's often been people she's close to. So it happened with one cousin, it happened with another cousin. And I said to her earlier, I'm like, if I'm ever in the car,
Yeah.
would you
Could
tell
you give
me?
me a call, please?
Yeah. And she's like, no, I won't
No.
tell you. And I'm like, Ma, actually, it might be helpful if you did. Maybe I could do something about it or, and I'm like, I've had other encounters with dead people. This is a totally normal conversation
Right.
to have with anyone, right?
Of
Especially
course,
one's
yeah.
mother. But yeah, it's just like a thing. And it's like it's reliable. It's one of the most reliable psi phenomena that I've heard
That's
reported,
like
which
the
is kind of
worst
interesting.
superpower you could have, you know what I mean? Like, to dream of, well, no, I mean, I guess it's half great and half not great, right? So, you're gonna dream about, a loved one or a friend or something that who you haven't seen and feel like they're visiting you, but it's almost like, "It's so great to see you, take care, bye-bye." You know, like, you're getting a little bit, "So
Pack
sorry."
light.
Yeah, "Hey, so sorry." Um, and especially
But
if you feel like it, but you know what it reminds me of? You remember we had a psychic that we knew, in common, Bill
oh,
Blindorf.
yeah. You know what?
So
It's so funny. He popped in my mind before you said
that's so
that.
funny because I thought about him. I was thinking about him. He actually came up in conversation, and he hasn't for years. With
Because when did Bill
when
pass?
I would say it was 2.5 years ago at this point. I think it'll be 3 years in June. And Bill and I were close for a short period for about, I would say, for about 4 years. And then when we had a weird kind of, I wouldn't, I think, I think you could call it a falling out, but I think it was really just kind of like things came to their natural conclusion. And
Okay.
I always loved him. I thought he was a terrific guy. And I think, and we all always got along very, very well. And we had a ton of fun together. And Bill was a very good psychic. He had difficulty um, relaying the information, but he was often very, very accurate. But I remember one time we were doing a séance, and no, we weren't doing a séance. Excuse me. He was doing readings in the shop at Paranormal Books and Curiosities in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and he the person he was doing the reading for was this woman. She came out and she was like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She gave him, a tip and an attaboy, and she left. And about 3 weeks later, she came in all in a, huff looking for him. And I said, "Oh, he wasn't, he's not working today." And she's like, "I really need to contact him." And I had his permission to give out his cell number or his email address. And so I said, "Oh, this is how you can contact him." And it turns out that when she had been in getting a reading the 3 weeks prior, Bill had given her lottery numbers to play, right? And I always used to make the joke that don't come in here looking for lottery numbers because you're not going to get them. And she played those numbers and she won $25,000, right? So she was looking for Bill to give him a tip, essentially to give him a thank you. She gave him
That's
$100, which
amazing.
I don't think was a sufficient tip. That's just for me. But I remember when Bill came back to the shop, he was like, "Yeah, I was glad that she got it. She really needed it." And I really think she needed it for something urgent, like something medical. And I said, "Well, why didn't you pay the numbers? Why didn't you play those numbers yourself?" And he goes, "Because they weren't for me." And, it was as if like something had come to him that was not really related to him. It was just kind of data, and he was, and had he elected not to share that with her, it wouldn't have worked out. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like with it's almost like your mom is a receiver, you know what I
Yes.
mean? But not a broadcaster. You know what I mean? So, like, if she were to pass that on, and it might just be for her to have an understanding that there's something beyond this world. You know what I mean? Something like that. What an interesting thing, though.
It totally is. And just 2 quick comments about what you mentioned. I mean, with my mother, I think it's that, like, I kind of feel like that would be a good indication that she should reach out to somebody.
Mhm.
And I almost think for her, it makes her not reach out because there's some anxiety around that.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Like, don't talk about the dream, don't talk about the dream, don't talk about the dream, then I have to talk about the dream.
or like if I acknowledge that I think there's something to the dream, it will happen and then I'll be
Right.
responsible.
Right, right, right,
Not that
right,
that's
right.
logical, but
Oh, but
um with Bill, I find that it is hard sometimes to find the words to articulate psychic information, especially if
right,
it comes through in feeling.
right.
It's so hard to try and take things that are beyond language or more kind of a felt sense and put them
Yeah.
into language that where somebody else will get the
Right, because
experience.
it's not linear. It's not like you're reading data. It's not an extraction of data. It's oftentimes a very interpretive, emotional, sense. It's
Yeah.
something sensory versus, I'm not it's not a telephone call where they're saying, "Hey, by the way, tell them, make sure not to go on an escalator on Tuesday." You know what I mean? It's something more like vague and honestly interpretive.
100%. I mean, I think people don't realize too that even amazing psychics, like the best ones in the world, are, for the people who've studied them, are like 85% accurate on
Which is
average. And that's
astonishing number. That's a
as which
huge
which is
number.
astonishing because they're pulling
Yeah.
things out of the ether. It could be
Right, right, right.
anything that comes to them. But,
Mhm.
I've always thought like the 15%, is it, or the 20% or whatever, is it that the information that comes through is wrong? And I don't think it's that so much as that it's so hard too if we don't have a frame of reference for
Right.
something. This is a total tangent from that, but I think I've told you that earlier this year, Mona Lisa Schultz passed away.
Mhm.
Mona Lisa, very well known medical intuitive and author who happened to be a physician and a neuroscientist. The reason I'm bringing her up is that there were even times I remember her describing something and I'm thinking, no, it doesn't fit. And then, like, there was some larger kind of context where it made sense. And I remember her saying to me one time, listen, right church, wrong pew.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
She
yeah.
was very she was very confident, but she was very specific about looking in somebody's body and describing what she
Right,
saw in medical terms. But for a normal, really good intuitive who picks up on stuff, you really don't have the language for that. And I'm just thinking like it really totally depends on what comes through, I think.
right. I will
Um,
say, like, I did a seance, a couple of weeks ago, and, sometimes you're doing things and, like, I wouldn't consider myself a psychic or a medium or anything like that. I just feel like I've been doing this so long and been around it so long that I'm not, I don't block it. You know what I mean? I don't play defense against the information that's coming in. I think a lot of people do. It's like, oh, I don't know why I'm thinking about that. Let me push it away. And I'm just kind
or
of
you
like, no,
feel nuts saying it.
yeah, or you're like, wow, what a weird thought I had, instead of thinking that it was something a little bit more targeted. And so I was doing the seance, and there was this great group of people, and they were so much fun. And you've done seances with me before. It's always laughing. It's always fun. And I believe that that's because laughter is as close to spirit as you can get. Laughter and singing, it's called raising your spirits for a reason. And, listen, we're a bunch of lunatics sitting around a table trying to talk to dead people. We might as well have fun with it. Right. And, I remember I was we were kind of connecting with with this woman's mother who had passed away, and sometimes you'll get the vibe of the person, right? For
Oh
me,
yeah.
sometimes it's like I could see how they're standing, or I feel a pain that they feel, or I'll say, "Oh, was there something? Did they have something wrong with their right ear or something?" And it's just because it's these twinges and these things that come to you. And from the outside, when it's not a reading that's happening for you, you're you want evidence like that's, would stand up in court. Excuse me, that was my phone. That would stand up in court, right? But it's not your court because it's not your reading, right? So the evidence that's going to come through is usually going to be the minutia of someone's life that the person who the reading is for is going to understand, validate, and have an emotional response to, right? So sometimes the person who's delivering the message is being asked or forced or pushed to say something they don't want to say. That happens to me all the time. It's like, I don't want to say that. Please don't make me say that. I don't want to say that. So we're connecting this woman. I would say that she would have been a very difficult mom to have, right? And I think she was making me aware of that. Now, that doesn't mean she's difficult now. It doesn't mean that she hasn't healed or done or I always say death doesn't perfect, but it does cure. So if the things that she was experiencing were being filtered through, you know, um, pain or physical or emotional trauma or something like that, she might not be experiencing that any longer. And so her personality might be different, her perspective might be different, but she might not be recognized because the person is like, no, my mother would have never done that, or she was mean, or she was this, and she's not anymore. So I was connecting and I was getting all of this, how she stood, phrases that she used. She was acknowledging that she was buried in this very specific sweatshirt, which was funny because I was like, "Did you bury your mom in a sweatshirt?" She's like, "I did. I buried my mom's sweatshirt." And
Which
then,
I don't know anyone who's ever done that, by the
well,
way.
believe it or not, I get there's a lot of in seances. There's a lot of interesting things
Oh, yeah.
about how people are buried and the kind of the non-religious ceremonial things that people do, which are personal. And those are that's the important information, right? The lottery numbers, the this, the that, that's not coming through. It's the minutia that says, listen, this is me. And you'll know it's me because I know what you did on your prom night. You know what I mean? Like something like that. And and it could be playing cards. Let's say it's playing cards, Tracy. Let's just pretend we all played cards on the prom night. So I'm getting this message that's coming through my head, and I'm thinking to myself, oh God, I don't want to say this out loud. Because I'm talking to this woman about her mother who's passed. And finally I just looked at her and I go, seriously, what's with the baked beans? Because I just kept seeing images of baked beans and well, you remember I did that with you at one point where a
I was gonna
casserole came
tell
through,
the
right?
corn
Yeah,
salad
we can do
story.
that. We can do that later. But so
Definitely.
everybody at the seance, there was 10 people at the seance, and 6 of them knew this woman and knew her mother. And they all went nuts when I said, what's with the baked beans? So I was like, what? Did she really like baked beans? And it turned out she didn't like baked beans, but she was very stubborn. And she was making this huge pot of baked beans in a pressure cooker. And she was doing it in the garage because they were doing it for this big tailgating thing that they were doing. And they were up in Cape Cod, so it was the Pats, right? It's the Patriots. And apparently she blew up the garage with the baked beans. Not once, but twice, right? So so her saying, just getting me to say baked beans was like literally saying something so unique to her. And, I mean that and that's what I mean when it's interpretive. It's like I always say to people like, "Oh, it feels like maybe it's a number 4." Well, what does a 4 feel like? I don't know. I just know it feels like 4.
It is
Where
so
where
hard
it's that
to
vibe.
articulate these
Yeah.
things.
And you wanna be I want it to be a telephone, trust me, but it's not. And
No.
I don't think it's easy on their side. I don't think it's easy on our side. I don't think we line up. I think it's more along the lines of like, a scattered broadcast that we pick up kind of intermittent things, and the more you receive, the more you say yes to, because there's something performative about it as well. So when I'm getting positive feedback for the
Raises
information,
your energy.
yes, and my confidence. So I'm leaning in because even though you're connecting with one particular person, that's not the only energy that's around you. So there's other energy that's kind of barking their little, making their little hum and their noises and things like that. Not intentionally to just, but there's like, it's kind of like listening to the murmuring of a crowd and then someone shouts out loud. Okay, well, that's the person I'm going to focus on because that's the loudest person right now. But with regard to Bill, he was very good. He just had he would sometimes have a hard time um
Putting
getting
into
that,
words,
yeah,
like, what
yeah,
he's
getting that message
perceiving.
through. Right, right.
Although the lottery numbers, I think, have to be the most impressive thing that I've heard. Because to be honest, that is so specific, and
So
numbers
specific,
are
so
the
specific.
hardest things to get.
You know what I always thought? And there was another psychic that worked for us. I'm not going to say her name just because I don't know if she would want me to.
Hmm.
But we'll call her L, right?
Okay.
Um, she was she was phenomenal, and she was very good at articulating and very good at getting messages through. But one of the things
This
that
is very
she
specific.
very specific. One of the things that she and I used to talk about was, she would remove ego. And I used to say, you're like a little goldfish. Like there's nothing blocking it. And she's like, that's exactly what I am. The information, because she would deliver information that she didn't agree with. But the information would come through. She had, she would have opinions about things, but if the information came through different with her opinion, it still came through. And I thought that that was a really important lesson as well, was that, you have to accept any reading that you're giving is not about you. It's not even about the person in front of you. You know, it's what's coming through, and you just kind of have to remove the ego from it. You are the telephone receiver. That's it. I heard someone say today, I'm a secretary. I just kind of deliver the information versus have any kind of action in it.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy to do, and it's not easy to do well, but for some people, it's, like, kind of amazing watching it. I wanna give you a little, some props for the seances because people can go to the Paranormal Museum in Asbury Park, New Jersey, which is amazing just as a place generally, but, no, the seances are fun.
Yeah.
You do a great job, and you don't need to, I know you're being modest, but don't downplay it. I'm laughing about we're kinda going off on a bit of a mediumship tangent, but that's okay. Um, I'm laughing as you're telling the baked beans thing because I didn't know where you were going with
Yeah.
it, but,
Yeah.
it's not as universal as baked bean lovers might imagine.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
I think I've eaten, like, a half a teaspoon of baked beans maybe once. We
Right.
did not have them growing up. I did not have them till probably a few years ago because Jay loves them.
Right.
It is not a universal thing, so I don't think that would be like, "Oh, well, who doesn't eat a ton of baked beans?" It's
But also the idea that
a
it
lot
would
of
be
people
what would
don't,
come up, but the idea that that would be what would come up you know what I mean? Like
and be
like
impactful.
and that everybody there would know exactly. And it becomes I always say there's no proof, but there's evidence. And
Yeah,
all of this information comes out, it goes into one pile or it goes into the other pile, and eventually you hit a tipping point. And with that particular reading, the tipping point had already happened.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? This was a period on the sentence. You know what I mean? And I do seem to specialize in picnic foods. If I remember correctly, that does seem to come for some reason. I don't know why picnic foods seem to resonate with me.
So maybe now I should tell quickly the story about the seance with you, and this has to be, my god, it might be like it's gotta be more than 5 years ago, it's
Oh, I think
probably
it's going
more
to be
like
10.
8 or 10
Yeah.
years ago.
Well, I'm in the new
So
place 8 years, so
oh
and
my
we
god,
were
so it's
in the
like 10
older,
years
yeah.
ago. So long story short, my mother is one of 4 children, she's the oldest, and her brothers are, several years younger. So my uncle and aunt were staying at our place because we used to live in the town. We used to have a place in the town next door to Asbury. So they were visiting over the summer and staying with us. And their younger son, Nick, is like, a little bit of a paranormalist. He loves that kind of stuff. So Nick must have been like, 20 or
Yeah.
18 or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And he was so excited. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to take you to my friend Kathy's, bookstore and museum. And oh, she's doing a seance. I'm going to take Nick. And so my aunt and uncle were like, all right, have at it. Like, I don't, And the next day, there was this family reunion of my mother's whole side of the family at my parents' house. So that night we go, and Nick is quite a lot younger than I am and didn't get to know my maternal grandmother or grandfather. I don't even think he was born when my grandfather passed. And he didn't get to know my grandmother as well, but he still felt a connection to her. And he had a lot of things going on and he just kind of wanted to hear from her and see what came through. So we go and maybe there's 10, 12 people at this
Mhm.
seance. I didn't really have any expectations. I think I'd been to one of your seances
Right,
before. And Kathy, it's quite something to watch because you step into your kind of like, I feel
right.
like you're the ringmaster of the
Yeah,
ghosts.
that's
So
how it feels for me. Yeah.
and you walk around saying things and a lot of other people are like, "Oh yeah, this is amazing. This is great." And you're getting information from them. So, my mind's almost kind of wandering. And you come around and I don't remember, you came through with names, I think, that definitely were specific to my
Right.
family and are not common names. And then I think you came over to Nick and he also had questions, but like spontaneously, you said something about him having 2 job opportunities, and one would be, much better for him, and this is what
Mhm.
he should look for. I didn't even know he was job hunting, and he had
Right.
been, and he had 2 interviews, and so you were spot on, and this was all coming from my grandmother. It was forecasted to rain at this family reunion the next day. It's the summer. We were supposed to get this big summer rainstorm. And all of a sudden you said, "Oh, it's not going to, your grandmother says it's not going to be raining tomorrow." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
What
Like,
she decided, right?
let's see what happens, because the Weather Channel
Mhm.
said that it is,
Yeah,
and
'cause
I'm going with that.
Sam Champion says yes, so.
Sam Champion said yes. Let's see what Ida might say no.
Mhm.
But, and then, like, all of a sudden, like, you're wrapping it up. You came through with a bunch of other stuff and other names of living people as well. And then you said something about, and she's showing me this big bowl of corn salad. And right there, you lost me, because I'm like, I have been to these things for 100 years. It's always the same crew. Everybody brings something, and it's always the exact same food. And my mother's family is, disclosure to people who don't know a lot about me personally, is like my mother's family is originally from southern Italy, a lot of them. So even their descendants, the food is very
Mhm,
specific, and no one has ever brought a corn salad to
mhm.
anything. And I don't know how often I've ever even eaten corn salad anywhere. So
I don't think I had ever seen it before. I saw it in my head.
like,
I
yeah,
never even heard of it.
like, I have since made corn salad,
Yeah.
just so you know, um, in the 10 years that have ensued. But anyway, so the next day, my aunt and uncle and my cousins go ahead of time. For some reason, Jay and I were going later. And so, because we told them all about the reading and all the stuff that you were spot on about, which was pretty much everything. Thank you again. Thank you, Ida. But my aunt sends me a photo of corn salad that my cousin's wife had brought,
And
and I
it's
like
huge.
it was like this huge corn salad, and I was like, "Holy crap!" Like,
You sent
and
me
and
that picture, yeah, and I remember it was like, "Wow."
and to someone else, they'd be like, "Oh, we have corn salad at everything," but we don't. And
Right.
the other thing is, it did not rain. And
Yeah,
I was like waiting all day for this big summer thunderstorm, and it did not happen. So anyway, very long-winded story, but it's so interesting, the stuff that comes through. The
right,
weird stuff and the persistent stuff, I feel like, is always the high impact stuff,
right.
even when you're like, "I don't wanna talk about the corn salad because it
Yeah, well,
sounds, like,
yeah, and it
weird."
wha if it's kinda like in life, right? If there's something you don't wanna do, it's probably the thing you're supposed to do, right? Or if there's something you're afraid of doing. And I don't mean like if someone's forcing you to rob a bank, but I mean if something is harder than something else, the hard thing is probably the thing that you should be doing. It's probably the right thing to do. It's probably, and I've always found that when I do these readings or when I do, it's always the thing that I'm like, please don't make me see that. That, is going to be the the kind of linchpin or the key that opens that up. And and again, it's because it's the minutia of private life and personal lives, and I will say a lot of times stuff does come through that I don't have a personal connection to. So that's hard for me to figure out how to say it. You know what I mean? Like corn salad is easy, right? It looks like corn. It's in a salad dish. It's got other things in it. That's corn salad. I've never heard of corn salad, but that's it. Baked beans are easy. Show me the Bush baked bean can. Show me baked beans. That's easy. I had one thing, and I realize we've gone down a rabbit hole here, but I had I had one reading that I did, and this was probably like 8 or 9 years ago, and it was a really, really big group. I usually try to keep it fairly intimate, 10, 12 people, but I think there was 17 or 20 or something like that. And to be quite honest with you, the larger the group, the more energy there is, the more likely you are to have kind of strong connections, but fewer people are going to get messages. And so I'm very comfortable with the 10 to 12 to 13 people. I don't like to do less than that because I don't feel like there's enough energy. Or it takes a lot longer, to kind of get that. But I remember I was doing this reading, and Everybody was lovely. We always laugh, and I spent a lot of time making, trying to connect with people so that we're comfortable enough with each other to kind of crack a joke and have fun, and that just loosens everybody up. And since it's like I don't want you coming in drunk, let's just have a couple of laughs. So but this gentleman had come through, and he had a common name. His name was Joseph, and I knew that he was one of two Josephs, right? So I knew it was him, and then there was a Joseph that was still here. And I remember it was like, well, this other Joseph is a younger male, but it's not it's not his son, it's not his nephew. I was leaning in that they were in a relationship together, but I didn't want to say it because I didn't feel like it was like so forthcoming from him. And the woman was like, "Yeah, I know. We knew, we understood. It was, we loved him, and we still love Joseph, and blah blah blah." So he kept showing me this black. It looked like a wallet or like a man's valet, like like a long kind of leather thing on it. And the woman was very receptive to it, but she wanted more. She wanted more. She wanted more. She wanted more. So it was kind of like, yeah, what was his address? What was his telephone number? Like that kind of stuff. But she really wanted evidentiary things. And I said, well, he's showing me this black wallet, and it's like a long thing that you might put a passport in it. It's longer than a regular wallet. And I go, and it has the Ferrari horse on it, like that. And she goes, well, his last name's Ferrari, like that. So it was like, he couldn't tell me his last name because it wasn't an auditory thing. He was showing
Yeah.
me symbols, and he moved me in that direction, to
What
say it.
First of all, how great that you knew with the Ferrari that I wouldn't have known there was a Ferrari
Right, right,
horse, which
right.
tells
He
you that
probably
I
would have gone someplace else with it. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
He would have gone into something else to get me to say it. But he was showing me lots of different things. And I find that that happens a lot. It's also when people are like I always say to people, if I ask you a direct question, answer me. Because listen, if you're waiting for a social security number, you're not going to get it. And if I'm
yeah,
asking you a direct question, it's because I need the answer to it. So I know
yeah,
which way to go with something. But if I don't ask you a direct question, don't offer up the information. Don't be like, oh my God, I do have a Joseph, and and he was this, and he was that, and he was this. No, no, just yes, I have a Joseph. Like,
yeah,
and because the truth is that if you're the one answering all of it, even though it doesn't lessen what's coming through, it lessens it in your mind. So let's make it work this way. And then you reach a point usually in a reading where they feel like the conversation is happening. And so um you can be a lot more casual and a lot more, back and forth with it. There are always people that
absolutely.
come in and they want proof, they like this, and it's like, well, that's not going to work for anybody. So,
No. And Kathy, I could talk about this all night. I want to make sure we get to our fan mail
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
super exciting to hear from people. And then I want us to talk a little bit about Krampus because I don't know if everybody knows about the Krampus tradition and how big it is at
Right.
paranormal. So I want to, maybe this is a good time for me to kind of move over um, to this woman. Let me just find her name, Danielle. I won't say her last name because I didn't ask if it was okay for me to. But so one of our listeners, one of our lovely listeners, and I believe you have met her, is named Danielle. And she heard the Bridie Murphy episode talking about reincarnation, and it made her think about her own child. So let me just kind of read from a little bit of her email. So she was talking about her son, and she said that when he was 2 years old, a few weeks away from turning 3, and she was driving with her own mother. This is so cute. Just discussing what kind of pies that she should bring to Thanksgiving. And this was timely because it was close to Thanksgiving when she wrote. So she and her mother are in the car with her son and talking about the pies to bring to Thanksgiving. And he pipes up from the back seat that Danielle, needed to make his favorite milk pie. So Danielle asks him what milk pie is, figuring that he's just, he's 3 and he's making something up. And then he proceeds to tell her, oh, that pie, it has milk, butter, eggs, and sugar. You used to make it. And so she said, I was like, okay, sure, buddy, not having any idea what the hell he's talking about and, just moving on. So, but later, I guess she got curious because he was so adamant and so detailed in his ingredients, for a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, and he was very insistent that, of course, she should know what he was talking about. So she Googled milk pie. By the way, I've never heard of milk pie
Me,
before.
I never had it either.
I mean of course I wouldn't because I barely have eaten baked beans. So, what the hell do I know?
Corn pie, corn salad
And I
pie.
wasn't a big corn salad person. So why would I know about the obscure milk pie? um, and she Googled milk pie and the ingredients and all these buttermilk pie recipes pop up. Who even knew? I didn't know. So she said, okay, it's strange. I've never heard of buttermilk pie, but it sounds like what he's talking about. So she'll make it. So she said all the recipes were pretty much the same and they all call for nutmeg to be sprinkled on top. So she follows the recipes, pretty much to a T and does that, sprinkles the nutmeg on the top. And she calls him into the kitchen to show him his pie. And he excitedly climbs up onto the counter, takes a look at the pie, and instantly starts sobbing, saying, that's not the way you used to make it. Last time you were my mom. I hate the spicy dirt on top. So he hadn't even tried it. So he's like falling apart over the nutmeg. So Danielle said she and her husband just sat there like, what the heck is going on? She like calmed him down and said, I'm so sorry. And she remade the pie for Christmas without the nutmeg and he approved, telling her that he knew that like he was so glad that she knew how to make it like she used to. So now she makes the buttermilk pie every year and they call it Tucker's pie because that's his name, Tucker. So also related to reincarnation, she said that when Tucker was 4-ish, he stopped dead in his tracks and out of nowhere told her that there's lots of versions of him in the past and there will be lots of versions of him in the future because it's all a circle. And then he went back to playing like nothing happened. So he's clearly referring to what you and I would think about as reincarnation,
Mhm.
but it was just like he said it, he knew it was true, and then he went off and kept playing and doing his thing. And then until he was about 6 years old, he would see random and insignificant to Danielle and her husband, random things and be in awe of them saying, wow, they didn't have these last time I was here, completely out of context for where they were or what the thing was. And also, she said when he was about 4, he told them that some of them had been family before and would stay family next time, but others were just here for now and they wouldn't meet them again. Other people they know. And he
Mhm.
always talked about the beach and how much he loved spending time at the beach, walking on it. But I guess because of wherever they live, he had never been to a beach.
Oh.
Again, you're talking about a 4-year-old. So,
Mhm.
and she said there were a bunch of other things that she didn't write down at the time, but they were very strange to her. And she said he's almost 10 now. And she said her family has always told him he's like an old man on the
Mhm.
inside. He enjoys his morning coffee after waking up at the crack of dawn, talking about inflation and foreign affairs, and complaining about Gen Alpha. So, Danielle and Tucker, thank you so much for sharing that. But, after hearing the Bridie Murphy episode, she said, oh, I want to share that. And, it made me think of, we discussed this a few episodes ago. It must have been during the Bridie Murphy episode, but remember, I was trying to remember the name of the woman. It's Carol
Right, right,
Bowman,
right, right.
who wrote
Mhm.
the book about children's past lives.
Right,
And
right,
so
right.
I referred her to that and Ian Stevenson's work and so forth. But how interesting. I
Yeah.
bet that happens way more than
Yeah, and
people talk about it.
I think that a lot of times, that will happen, and it's an interesting thing, and people kind of, kind of put it in their back pocket, say, "Hmm, that was kind of interesting." And then, around the age of 6 or 7, which is, the age of reason, um, it tends to fall away. And I would imagine that it tends to fall away because the exterior world becomes a lot more, demanding, when you start to get to that age. And, you have there's just only so much you can focus on as a child, on the past and things like that. Um, that's interesting though to me, especially, and I love the idea that she made the pie. You know what I mean? That she actually
Oh,
sought
yeah.
out the recipe and made the pie. It's interesting. I was thinking about this just after we did the Bridie Murphy case, and you start to think about things. And one of the things I was thinking about was whether or not, we use reincarnation, past life, and regression and things like that kind of interchangeably. And I wonder if there isn't something less direct than reincarnation that sometimes people experience, which is kind of a generational memory that is, just recorded in our DNA. So it may not have been an actual, obviously what he was saying was he had memories as an individual, but where there might be data that children are conscious of that is not necessarily the recollection of a full life that was lived, which means that, one soul a soul is not reincarnating, but the information of that life has been kind of sewn into, or is part of the fabric of this new life, and that, and who always another person that we know in common, Leanne, always talked about how, she's another great psychic, another medium. She's not practicing any longer, um but where uh these types of things are more fibrous than linear, and so you might have people remembering or recollecting things from another time, but it's not necessarily a direct, reincarnation. It's a collective memory, that, and that's very interesting to me as well. Obviously, what Tucker's talking about though is he's literally saying me and you. Me and you then, me and you now. I thought it was interesting the last time you were my mommy.
I
That the
totally.
relationship was the same.
I wanna meet this kid totally
Yeah.
because he sounds
Yeah, he'll
like
he'll probably like, "Tracy, you want me to check the oil in your car?" He's like, "Oh," but I mean, we use that phrase all the time in Old Soul, and I
Yeah, no,
mean,
he sounds
that's what
like
it
it.
means, right? I mean, when you look at a kid, and I have lots of nieces and nephews, and there's one or two in there that I'm like, "That's an Old Soul," because they seem to have an understanding of things that, for lack of a better phrase, they should not. They shouldn't have that kind of comprehension of human experience and things like that. So I love that. I love getting that kind of mail where
Yeah,
people are, giving us, more, fodder for thinking, and it just kind of keeps pushing you down the road into, the rabbit hole of the paranormal.
I love it. And Danielle, thanks again for sharing your experience because, we are so touched and excited that you watched the show. Um, so yeah, anybody else, please do send us your thoughts, things you want us to take a look at, your experiences, associations you have to some of the stuff we're talking about.
And if you disagree, if you think we're getting it wrong, or you think that there's another avenue or a way that we're not looking at things, that's even more exciting to me. You know what I mean? I love the idea of hearing new thoughts. There's no experts in this field. There are only people with a little bit more experience, and I would say that we're all students. And I would say that we're all teachers. And so I would be excited to hear other people's ideas on this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So, Kath, I want to be mindful of, kind of what we've promised we would talk about. Krampus. You were the first person that I ever heard about Krampus from. So I'm sure there are quite a few people who know about Krampus, but there are quite a few people who don't.
Right.
And this is a huge thing at the Paranormal
Right.
Museum. But beyond, certainly beyond Asbury Park.
It's growing bigger. We do two major festivals in Asbury Park as the Paranormal Museum. We do lots of little things, but the two major festivals that we do are the Krampus Asbury Park Festival and the Jersey Devil Fable Festival. Krampus is the first weekend in December, and the Jersey Devil Fable Festival is the first weekend in May. And this was our 10th year doing Krampus Asbury Park. And I fell in love with this folklore because it's kind of like keeping Halloween going into December, but also because it's just so deep and a lot of people look at it as dark. I don't look at it as dark. I look at it as being very, very um, uh very much the balance of nature. So it's Krampus is an anthropomorphic figure who represents, if people contemporarily will talk about Krampus as being like the anti Santa Claus or the opposite of Santa. Santa brings presents to good children, Krampus brings punishment to bad children. And that's a very, very kind of modern, simplistic look at what Krampus really was. Krampus becomes popular. Krampus has been around since before Christianity, right? So he's been a figure in folklore before Christianity. He's called lots of different things in lots of different places. And if you want to go back very, very far, you could look and say, well, he's Pan, right? So he is kind of the power of nature, of which there's always balance, right? So you have, it's not just good and bad, but it's winter and it's summer and it's positive, it's negative, and those are not necessarily good things or bad things. They're just fully balanced. And Krampus, as Christianity took hold in northern, western, and eastern Europe, that figure came to represent the balance of Saint Nicholas was gift giving. Saint Nicholas was rewarding. Krampus was going to deliver the comeuppance for people who misbehaved. Now, I would say Krampus is not. Now, if you've never seen him, he's massive. He's got a big red tongue that comes out of his mouth, like it's huge. It's like, down to his chest. He's got horns. He's got one cloven foot. He's got talons. The other foot is like a human foot. And he's covered in fur. I don't know that Krampus would talk. You know what I mean? He's just essentially this big creature. And yeah, he was a boogeyman figure in a lot of northern and western European countries, and he was a way of controlling behavior. But if you remember, in the Yuletide in those countries, specifically in Germany or Austria, uh, the Yuletide is dark, it's cold, and it's dangerous, right? So you have people sitting in small houses where it's getting dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The woods are all around them. There really are creatures that want to, damage them and consume them and everything. And if your kids are going to go out into the woods, you want to scare them into staying. So Krampus would essentially he would dole out the punishment for naughty children. So it was a good way to make sure that to keep your kids in line. But I would say this, Krampus is not a psychopath. He's not just grabbing any kid off the street. If Krampus is coming for you, you have a pretty good idea why, right? Like you know what you've done. And there certainly is a sliding scale. He goes from, coal in your stocking or dirt in your shoes, depending on where you are in Europe, to throwing you in a sack and consuming you the following morning. But he does not get he doesn't do that arbitrarily. It's done entirely on your behavior. So we have a big festival. It's a tradition that was, there are many Krampus-like figures throughout Eastern, Western, and Northern Europe. Poland has one. Czech has one called Sert. There's a couple that are based on human beings. There's one in Austria that's based on a 15th century lord. There's a Père Fouettard in France. Belsnickel is actually still celebrated in Pennsylvania Dutch country. And so they're all kind of like Krampus light. They're not quite as bad as him. He's not quite as terrifying. There's in Iceland, there's Grilla, who is absolutely more scary than Krampus. She's a giant, she's an ogress, and she'll consume children and whatnot. So 10 years ago, I decided that this was going to be my Yuletide festivity. We've been doing it for 10 years. People come dress, and it's very traditional in those countries for particularly young men to kind of join these troops of Krampuses, and they would march through their villages and through their towns. And then in
Dressed up?
dressed up and dressed up in incredibly ornate and incredibly beautiful wooden hand carved masks that are carved out of one solid piece of wood. These costumes could be anywhere from 30 to 60 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And they would march through, and it would be tradition and go knock at a house on. It would be December. St. Nicholas's Day would be December 6th. So Krampus would come on the 5th. So he was like an early warning system that you were not going to get presents, if Krampus showed up. And I would say he scared the hell out of a lot of kids in Austria and in Germany and whatnot. But in 1940, Nazi Germany outlawed Krampus and any of the creatures that were related to that folklore in any of the regions that they were in power. And there were lots of reasons why they did it, but one of the reasons was to just undermine the kind of connective tissue of folklore, because Krampus was not necessarily related exclusively to Christianity or to Catholicism, but was something that was considered part of the Yuletide. So it predated religion in that way. And it was in the 1990s that some young punk rockers in Germany were like, this is a part of our culture we want to bring back. But a number of generations had passed. So 2 generations had passed since then. So they didn't have the direct connection to that folklore, and so they've kind of recreated it. I was lucky enough to go to Krampus in Munich and Baden-Baden and Klagenfurt in 2018, and it really is remarkable. I mean, it's funny because it's literally, they don't even sell a postcard with Krampus on it. There's no commercialization of it at all. And kids are absolutely terrified. Um, but other kids absolutely love it. And in our festival, I would say the kids, I have pictures whenever somebody complains to us about, why are you doing that to the kids? I just have a handful of pictures, and I'm like, tell me that this kid isn't having the time of his life.
Well, I couldn't come this year, and I'm sorry about that. But last year, you have your brunch, and I know I Jersify my pronunciation with
Yeah.
Krampus, which
Yeah.
is like
And I
not
do too. I
really
go back and forth. I generally say Krampus. Some people say Krumpish, you
Krampus.
know.
But I remember these women brought their son in, and he must have been like 4.
Yeah.
And I remember I was sitting near them, and they're like, "Oh, he loves, Krampus." And I'm thinking, like, I don't know, could a 4-year-old like this
Oh,
monstrous, like, because you had Joe dressed
right.
as
Yep. Mhm.
Krampus at the front of the room, and that was scary to me. And there's a picture of it's the picture we use for the podcast, but
Right, right,
this
right.
kid loves him
Absolutely
and
loves
had the
them.
doll and was not scared at all of Joe dressed in this extremely scary
So
costume.
that family came on Sunday again, and now he's 5, right? And he has 2 Krumpuses that are with him, and he'll tell you all the Krampus lore, he'll tell you everything. And they said that he talked about it all year long. And there was a lot of children this year. Last year there weren't as many. I think there was maybe 2 or 3 last year, but this year there was a lot of kids, and every one of them understood. And here's the thing. You know, we grow up in a culture that talks to us about Santa Claus, regardless of what our religious background is. There's crime. I'm not sure that you could say that Santa is religious, but here you have Santa Claus, and Santa Claus is very arbitrary and he's very powerful. He keeps a list and he's jolly, but I don't know what he's thinking of me. I don't know what list I'm on. I'm supposed to love him. He watches me when I sleep. What's going on? Like there's something. So every kid loves Santa, but is afraid of him because at any moment Santa can change and not bring you a present. Like you don't know where you stand with him. And he
You've got to
has this,
bribe him with cookies or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
It's
He
just it's
has
not
this,
really
he has this crazy power, over, but he doesn't let you know. You don't know where you stand with him. With Krampus, you know where you stand. If you see Krampus, he's coming for you. You know what I
Ugh.
mean? And it's not. It was very funny. The first year I did it, I had a landscaper that I was good friends with, and he was up in he grew up in Austria or just outside of Vienna in Austria. And I asked him, I said, "Have you ever heard of Krampus?" And his face just went pale. And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Heard of Krampus?" He's like, "I used to be terrified." And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, because the young men, the teenage boys, used to be allowed to dress up." And he goes, "They used to come in and beat the hell out of us." And of course, culturally that's different now. But when I was in Munich, um, they did a Krampuslauf twice. So Krampuslauf literally means the running of the Krampuses, right? So, and they don't come as singulars, they come as troops. And they have certain bells that they use, and there's certain marching that
Mm.
they do so that so you know what group you're with. So this is the group from, Klagenfurt, and this is the group from Baden-Baden. And they take a lot of pride in it's I would imagine it's very similar to like mummers or like a marching band or something that they take a lot of pride in. And they're allowed to hit you in Munich, so they have these little switches, which is a fancy name for a whip, and they are allowed to hit you. Now they're only allowed to hit you below the knee, but they can hit you. And there was this 10-year-old, and he was dressed in the same costume that his father was in, but it was a 10-year-old size, and he had the mask, and he's going like this. And it was raining that day, and he sees me, and he takes his whip and he wets it, right? So it's going to be really, and I'm like, "That's so cute. What's that guy doing?" And the next thing, he just slaps me across the back of my calves. And I was like, "Oh my God, that hurt so much." And you know, they don't talk, they don't break character, and there's thousands of people here. And he grabbed my camera. I had a GoPro, and he took off with it. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
"What am I going to do?" About 6 minutes later, he comes back with it and he hands it to me. And it's the best footage I got of my entire vacation because he took that camera and everything was a Krampus eye view, right? So it was all of these people reacting to him. And it was just, it was just one of those, everybody in the group, everybody that was there understood that they were a part of something that was outside of the norm. And I think that, like, one of the things that I said on Sunday is, there were 50 people at brunch, and I was just like, you guys, you found your tribe. Like, if this is what you're looking for, you found it. Because um I do a Monsters of Yule tour, and this year I think there were
Of
14 of
course
them.
you do.
Well, and it's a free walking tour because I like to encourage people to have an analog life sometimes and just do storytelling, and it's what I love about our Krampus festival is parents come up to me and they say it's the only thing my teenagers will do with us. They don't want to hang out with us anymore, but they want to come to this. And but I did I think I had 14 monsters on the tour this year, and that's 14 different monsters from the Yuletide, including and from different countries. So each country kind of has one. And there's one that comes, La Befana is from Italy, and that's why she's the Christmas witch, and she's why we hang stockings on our mantles. And you have lots of Iceland is the weirdest place. But so there were all of these things that have kind of fallen by the wayside, as we've kind of homogenized and kind of become this Coca-Cola Santa Claus experience. And I love the idea. We had we had phenomenal Krampuses come out this year. I mean, I think we had 20 or 25. I mean, and the costumes and the carvings that people did were just amazing.
That
It's
is
exciting and
awesome.
fun. Yeah, it was exciting and fun.
It really is. And I'm sorry I missed it this year. I did catch on Instagram. I saw a lot of the posts with some of the
Right.
stills and the video of everybody kind of racing down the street. I saw you reading the naughty list. So
Yes,
it's
That's I would say the most popular thing that we do is the reading of the naughty list. And I think this year it took me 11 minutes to do it.
Oh
So
my
there are
God.
quite a few names.
A lot of
My only
naughty
rule is
people.
I won't do anything political because it's like, this is
Too
fun and
much.
let's just have fun with it. One of the other things that we did was we had a 20-foot inflatable tree. And the Krampus that won this year was so big. I was at one side of the city street, and it's a full city street between me and him. And I was filming, and he was such a big dude, and I had a 20-foot inflatable tree.
I saw.
And I was like, Krampus should pull it down. Like that's how we're going to end our festival, right? And I didn't want to knock down a real tree or anything like that. It's just an inflatable tree, and if I unplugged it, it would take 20 minutes for the air to go out. So we just kind of dropped it down. So, but I was all the way at the other end, and he was so big. You could see him over the crowd, and there were probably 200 people between me and him, maybe more. And all of a sudden you hear him say, "Knock this tree down." And it was so loud that he was over the screaming kids. And it was at that moment that I was just like, this was a successful Krampus. We're going to knock the tree down. And he did. He pulled it down. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
And I think there's a clip of that too.
Yeah.
So great, so fun. I'm sorry I missed it. But you do a whole bunch of exciting things at the museum, so people can catch other things and put on their to-do list
Right.
Krampus for next year, definitely. And then the next thing coming up is Jersey Devil. Anything between now and Jersey Devil?
Yeah, we're doing Dead of Winter with Adam Berry, which is the first weekend in March. Adam
He's
comes
coming
out.
down.
He comes down and we investigate the museum.
Okay.
And we do kind of a full weekend of events. The Jersey Devil Fable Festival this year, though, is going to definitely have the Pod Barons. So if you're a person who's interested in podcasts, or if you are a podcaster, if you're a podcaster, certainly reach out. But
We'll be there.
Yeah, we'll be there. And we give other podcasters the opportunity to podcast live from the Paranormal Museum. We also have this great little area set up, and it's called the Pod Barons because there's a famous place in New Jersey called the Pine Barrens. And since I think most of the podcasters that will participating kind of skew into the dark and stormy like we do, I thought that was appropriate. But we've got a lot of events coming up.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun year.
And what do you remember offhand the date for Dead of Winter?
Dead of Winter is the first weekend in March, so I think it's March 3rd and 4th.
And tickets are through Paranormal,
you can go to the website,
or through Adam's website?
They're at Paranormal, so it's paranormalbooksnj.com. And I don't think they're up there right now, but they're going to be up there by the end of the week.
I'm going to try and do it this year.
There's different tiers that you can do. So we do we do kind of a Friday night cocktail party. Meet and greet. Adam's a lot of fun, but I do like to do I do like to do something social before doing an investigation, especially when it's a public investigation. And the reason is that I think people are more comfortable with each other after they know each other for a little while, and that always leads to a better, more impactful investigation.
And last year you got great stuff.
Oh my gosh, we got great. Yeah.
We still need to go over that on this.
Yeah, we've got a
podcast.
crazy EVP. This year we're actually going to open up the basement as well. I've actually cleared out space so that people can sit comfortably in it. Because I
won't be doing that.
Yeah, you will not be in the basement.
I know what's been in that basement.
Yeah,
all the creepy artifacts.
What still is in that basement. And that's one of the reasons why is that there are artifacts in the basement that I don't put on display. So if people choose to go down there, they can sign a waiver and go down there.
Oh man.
What's up to them?
Well, Kathy, it was so great to catch up. We had a lot of fun tonight. I think this is a good place to kind of, finish up till next time. But so great to see you.
And great to see you.
And everyone, again, let us know what you think. Share your thoughts, your spooky experiences. You can go to our website, which is curious-explorers.com. You can leave us a comment. There's a form for you to contact us on our website.
The episode,
let us know what you think, and let us know what spooky things are happening for you.
Let us know what you'd like to hear more
and keep exploring. And of course, until next time, bye. Stay
Bye, guys.
curious.